The first gunshot echoed through the emergency department just after midnight. Patients screamed. Monitors shrilled. Nurses dropped behind beds as masked gunmen stormed through the ambulance entrance, sealing every exit within seconds. Near the trauma supply cabinet, one nurse did not run. She quietly finished tightening a tourniquet around a crash victim's leg before looking toward the shattered glass doors. Her face remained calm while everyone around her searched for somewhere to hide. A frightened intern grabbed her arm and whispered, "They're just after the money. Please don't do anything." She gave a small nod, but as the gunmen spread through the department with military precision, it became painfully clear that they were not robbers. They were hunting someone. No one in that hospital realized they had already found the only person capable of stopping what was coming. The emergency department never truly became quiet. Even after midnight, the automatic doors opened every few minutes. Ambulances arrived with flashing lights that reflected across polished floors. Monitors chimed from every direction. Phones rang. Stretchers rolled past with hurried footsteps following close behind. For most people working the night shift, the noise blended into the background. For Emma Carter, it never did. She adjusted the blanket over an elderly woman recovering from chest pain before checking the patient's monitor one more time. The rhythm was steady. Blood pressure had improved. Oxygen saturation held where she wanted it. "How are you feeling now?" Emma asked. "A little better," the woman whispered. Emma smiled gently. "Good. Try to get some rest. I'll be nearby." The woman reached for her hand. "Thank you." Emma simply nodded before moving to the next bed. She never hurried unless someone else's heartbeat demanded it. That calm pace often made new staff mistake her for someone who lacked urgency. They would eventually learn that Emma simply wasted no movement. Across the trauma bay, Dr. Michael Harris glanced toward her while reviewing imaging on a tablet. "Emma." She looked up. "Room 6 needs another 4 started. I'm on my way." One of the first-year residents sighed as Emma walked past. "I don't know how she stays so relaxed." Another resident laughed quietly. "She's been here forever. After enough years, nothing surprises you." Emma heard them. She pretended she hadn't. Inside room 6, a construction worker winced as she prepared the equipment. "I hate needles." "I know," Emma replied softly. "You don't look nervous. I've done this a few times." He smiled. "That's comforting." She found the vein almost immediately. The catheter slid into place on the first attempt. "No way," he said, staring at his arm. "You already finished?" Emma secured the line with practiced hands. "You're all set." After documenting the procedure, she stepped into the hallway just as another ambulance radioed ahead. "Incoming trauma. Motor vehicle collision. 2 patients. ETA 3 minutes." The department instantly shifted gears. Doctors gathered near the trauma room. Respiratory therapists rolled equipment into position. Security cleared the ambulance entrance. Emma quietly checked supplies. Airway cart, blood warmer, chest tubes, ultrasound. Nothing was missing. She noticed a pair of trauma shears lying beneath a cabinet and picked them up without thinking. Small things mattered. Small mistakes became large ones during emergencies. The ambulance doors burst open exactly 3 minutes later. Paramedics rushed inside. Male, 28. High-speed rollover. Blood pressure dropping. Emma moved beside the stretcher. She listened, observed, counted breaths, watched skin color. She spoke only when necessary. "Pressure's falling. Large bore 4 ready. Blood products are here." Every sentence was short, precise, useful. Within minutes, the trauma room settled into controlled rhythm. Dr. Harris glanced toward her. "Nice catch on the abdominal bleed." She simply nodded. The resident beside him looked confused. "You saw that before the ultrasound?" "I noticed his breathing." "That was enough?" Emma had already moved toward the medication cabinet. The resident stared after her. Dr. Harris smiled faintly. "Eventually you'll stop asking." The night continued. Broken wrists, asthma attacks, an overdose, a child with a fever. Every patient received the same quiet attention. No drama, no complaints, just careful work. At 2:15 in the morning, Emma finally accepted a paper cup of coffee from another nurse. "You've been running for 6 hours, Lisa said. "You should sit." "I will. You always say that." Emma smiled. Lisa lowered her voice. "New security company tonight." Emma looked through the glass entrance toward 2 unfamiliar guards. "I noticed. They're probably temporary." "Maybe." Lisa shrugged. "You notice everything." Emma said nothing. She watched one of the guards. His uniform looked correct. His posture did not. Most private security officers stood casually. This man unconsciously checked reflections in windows every few seconds. His eyes constantly measured distances. Habit, not training given by a hospital contractor. Interesting. Emma took another sip of coffee. Outside, rain began falling harder. Headlights blurred against the glass. An unmarked dark van slowed briefly across the street before continuing. She watched until it disappeared. Lisa noticed. What? Nothing. You've got that look. What look? The one where you're thinking. Emma looked back toward the nurse's station. It's probably nothing. Probably. She disliked that word. Her radio crackled. Trauma nurse Carter to pediatric observation. She set down the untouched coffee. I'm coming. In pediatrics, a frightened 7-year-old boy clutched a stuffed dinosaur while trying not to cry. His mother looked exhausted. Emma knelt until she was at eye level. Can I borrow your dinosaur for 1 minute? The boy hesitated before handing it over. Emma wrapped a tiny bandage around the toy's arm. There. She handed it back. He's brave now. The boy laughed. So am I. I think you've been brave this whole time. He nodded seriously before allowing the doctor to examine him. His mother whispered, Thank you. Emma smiled. It's easier when someone isn't alone. As she left the room, her expression returned to quiet focus. She checked the hallway clock. 2:43 a.m. Her eyes drifted toward the emergency entrance again. 1 ambulance. 2 police cars. Nothing unusual, yet something felt different. Not dangerous. Not yet. Just slightly out of place. She couldn't explain why. Years of trauma nursing had taught her that instincts were often built from details the conscious mind had not yet organized. She trusted those instincts. She simply never announced them. Back at the nurse's station, Dr. Harris walked beside her. You've been staring outside all night. I have. You have. What do you think I'm looking for? He shrugged. If I knew that, I'd probably sleep better. For the first time that night, Emma gave a faint laugh. I doubt it. He smiled. Go finish your coffee. I'll try. She picked up the now-cold paper cup. The overhead lights reflected in the glass entrance once more. Outside, the rain continued falling. Across the street, another dark vehicle rolled slowly past the hospital before disappearing into the night. Emma watched it until the taillights vanished. Then she quietly returned to her patients. She had no way of knowing that before sunrise.
The emergency department settled into the strange rhythm that belonged only to the hours before dawn. The rush from the traffic accident had passed. Several patients had been admitted upstairs. Others waited for test results under warm blankets, half asleep beneath the soft glow of ceiling lights. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Inside, the clock moved toward 3 o'clock. Emma Carter finally took a seat for less than a minute at the nurse's station. She opened a patient's chart, reviewed medication times, and quietly corrected a dosage, schedule that a tired resident had entered incorrectly. Dr. Michael Harris noticed, You caught another one. Emma looked up. It was only 15 minutes off. Still, he closed the chart. I wish everyone paid attention like you, Emma answered without looking for praise. It's easier to fix a mistake before it reaches a patient. Before he could respond, the emergency radio crackled. County dispatch to Mercy General. Minor highway collision. 1 patient. Stable condition. Arrival in 6 minutes. Nothing unusual. The department continued working. Across the room, Lisa walked over carrying fresh IV supplies. You still haven't finished your coffee? Emma looked at the cold cup. I don't think I will. Lisa laughed. You buy coffee just to watch it get cold. It keeps me optimistic. For about 5 minutes, Emma smiled politely. Small conversations mattered. They kept frightened families calm. They reminded exhausted staff that they were still human. Yet even while speaking, part of Emma's attention remained elsewhere. She noticed one of the security monitors flicker for less than a second. Most people never looked at the monitors unless something happened. Emma did. The image returned immediately, probably harmless. Still. She stood. I'm going to check trauma 3, Lisa frowned. Didn't you just come from there? I want another look. Nothing had changed. The room remained organized. Equipment sat exactly where it belonged. She checked oxygen levels. Suction, emergency blood, airway equipment. Every item rested within reach. She adjusted one portable monitor by only a few inches. No one else would have cared. She did. In emergencies, inches sometimes became seconds. Seconds became lives. When she returned to the hallway, she crossed paths with one of the temporary security guards. He offered a friendly smile. "Busy night?" "Always. You've worked here long?" "A while." He nodded before continuing toward the entrance. Emma watched him walk away. Something about his equipment bothered her. His flashlight hung on the wrong side of his duty belt. Small detail, insignificant to almost everyone. But experienced security officers usually carried gear according to habit and training. This guard adjusted his belt twice within 10 seconds. Like someone wearing unfamiliar equipment. Emma kept walking. She did not accuse him. She had no evidence, only another tiny detail that refused to disappear from her thoughts. Near radiology, she found maintenance supervisor Carlos replacing a ceiling panel. "Morning," he said. "Morning. You hear about the cameras?" She stopped. "What cameras?" "Maintenance rebooted 2 outside units after they froze for a minute." "When?" "Maybe 20 minutes ago." "They're working now?" "So they tell me." Emma thanked him and continued toward the emergency entrance. She looked through the glass. Everything appeared normal. Ambulances came and went. Rain washed across the parking lot. Visitors hurried beneath umbrellas. Nothing suggested danger, nothing visible anyway. Dr. Harris stepped beside her. "You look like you're waiting for something." "I'm trying to decide." "About what?" "If tonight feels strange because we're tired. Or because something actually is." He studied her for a moment. "You've had instincts before. I've also been wrong." "Not often." She gave a quiet shrug. "I'd rather be wrong." He nodded. "So would I." The moment ended as another patient arrived, an elderly man struggling to breathe. Emma immediately returned to work. Mask, oxygen, vitals, medication, calm instructions. Everything moved with practiced efficiency. The patient stabilized within minutes. His daughter wiped tears from her eyes. "Thank you." Emma squeezed her shoulder gently. "He's doing better." The woman began crying from relief. Emma stayed beside her until she could breathe normally again. Kindness required no announcement. Neither did competence. Hours passed. At 3:41 a.m., the automatic doors opened again. A delivery driver entered carrying several sealed medical supply containers. Emma glanced toward the paperwork. The shipping label caught her attention. Wrong color. She looked closer. The hospital had changed vendors nearly 6 months earlier. Old labels were no longer used. The driver noticed her looking. "Problem?" "No." She smiled politely. "Just checking inventory." He handed the forms to another employee and left. Emma watched through the glass as the truck drove away. Its company logo looked correct. Its license plate did not match the transport company registered with the hospital. She quietly wrote the number on a small notepad. No assumptions, just facts. Lisa noticed. "What are you writing?" "A plate number." "Why? I'll probably throw it away." "You really do notice everything." Emma folded the paper into her pocket. "I notice enough." Before dawn, she visited the emergency exits one final time. Every door opened properly. Every hallway remained clear. Fire extinguishers, emergency oxygen, backup generators. She never explained why she checked these things. People assumed she was unusually thorough. They were partly right. On her way back, she paused outside the staff lounge. 2 young residents were talking. "Emma worries too much." "I know. She's probably memorized the entire building." The second resident laughed. "She's just a trauma nurse." Emma kept walking. She felt no anger, only silence. Titles rarely told the whole story. At exactly 4 o'clock, the hospital switched to overnight energy-saving lighting in several administrative corridors. The emergency department remained bright. But for 2 seconds, every light near the ambulance entrance dimmed, then returned. Most staff ignored it. Emma looked toward the ceiling. Power fluctuation? Maybe. Or someone testing electrical systems. Again. No proof. Only another piece that did not fit. She reported the flicker to hospital engineering, the technician answered with a tired voice. We're not showing any faults. All right. Probably weather. Maybe. She hung up. The word returned again. Probably. She disliked it even more now. Outside, hidden beyond the rain, a black utility vehicle stopped for less than 30 seconds across the street. Inside sat 3 masked men studying digital floor plans illuminated by tablet screens. The hospital remained unaware. The emergency department continued treating patients. Families drank coffee. Doctors reviewed scans. Children slept beside worried parents. Life moved forward exactly as it always had. Inside the building, Emma Carter quietly completed another patient chart. She looked once more toward the entrance. Her instincts had stopped whispering. Now they were waiting. She still had no evidence. No explanation. Only the growing certainty that before this shift ended, someone would try to turn a place built to save lives into something else. And when that moment came, every small detail she had noticed would matter.
The emergency department had been under the gunman's control for almost 20 minutes. Long enough for fear to settle. Long enough for people to stop expecting someone to rush through the doors and save them. The waiting room had become silent except for muffled sobs and the steady rhythm of cardiac monitors. Patients lay where they had been ordered to stay. Doctors sat against walls with their hands visible. Nurses remained beside the people who needed constant care. The gunman had separated everyone into groups. Critical patients stayed in the trauma bays. Children remained in the pediatric observation rooms. Hospital staff occupied the central treatment area under armed watch. The arrangement looked organized. To Emma, it also revealed something else. The men controlling the department understood how hospitals worked. Not perfectly, but well enough. She knelt beside the injured paramedic again. His pulse had strengthened. The pressure dressing was holding. He opened his eyes. How long? Not long. My partner. Outside. He tried to move. Emma rested a hand gently on his shoulder. Save your strength. He obeyed. Not because she sounded commanding, because she sounded certain. Across the room, Lisa was helping an elderly woman drink small sips of water. She looked toward Emma. Emma gave the smallest shake of her head. Not yet. Lisa understood. No sudden movements. No unnecessary risks. The youngest gunman paced near the nurse's station. His weapon never stopped moving. Every few seconds, he looked toward the windows, then toward the hostages, then back again. Emma watched without appearing to watch. He was exhausted. His breathing had become shallow. His shoulders were tightening. He was beginning to lose control. That made him the most dangerous person in the room. The leader remained different. He barely moved. He spoke quietly into his headset every few minutes, listening far more than talking. He never raised his voice. He never repeated an order. The others obeyed him immediately. Professional discipline. Emma noticed another detail. Every member of the group covered different angles without discussing them. No overlapping fields of view. No confusion. They had trained together. For a long time. Dr. Harris slowly moved beside her while pretending to check another patient's chart. Without looking directly at her, he whispered, "Do you have any idea who they are?" Emma kept changing the foretubing. "No. They're military. Maybe. You don't sound surprised." "I'm trying not to guess." He glanced toward her. "You've been right about everything tonight. I've noticed things. That's different." "No." She finished securing the line. "It's exactly the same." Before he could answer, one of the gunmen approached. "What are you talking about?" Dr. Harris answered first. "My patient needs antibiotics." The gunman looked toward Emma. She held up the medication syringe. "If I wait another hour, she'll become septic." He hesitated. "I'll ask." He walked away. Dr. Harris stared after him. "You weren't bluffing." "No. You really needed that medication." "Yes." "And you knew he'd check." "I hoped he would." Within 2 minutes, the leader nodded. "Give it." Emma administered the antibiotics exactly as planned. Not because she had manipulated anyone, because every life still mattered. Even now, especially now, outside the hospital, rain continued falling across flashing police lights. Television crews had begun arriving behind the growing security perimeter. No one knew exactly how many hostages remained inside. The tactical command vehicle stood beneath portable floodlights. Captain Daniel Brooks from the city police studied the building's floor plans spread across a folding table. We've lost internal cameras. What about maintenance access? Blocked. Roof? No visual confirmation. Another officer approached carrying a headset. State Tactical Command is requesting an update. Brooks sighed. We don't have one. A communications specialist interrupted. We've intercepted short-range encrypted radio traffic. Can you decode it? No. Origin. Inside the emergency department. Brooks looked back toward the brightly lit entrance. This wasn't random. No, sir. It never was. Inside, the youngest gunman suddenly shouted. You. Everyone looked up. A frightened teenage volunteer froze beside the supply room. I said stay still. The rifle swung toward the boy. His hands immediately went into the air. I'm sorry. His entire body shook. Emma stood before anyone realized she had moved. He's bringing insulin. The gunman kept aiming. No one told him. Emma stopped several feet away. There are diabetic patients. Silence. If they don't receive treatment, they die. The young gunman's finger tightened against the trigger. Emma spoke more softly. Look at him. The gunman frowned. What? He's terrified. So, he's not a threat. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then the leader spoke from across the room. Let the volunteer finish. The rifle lowered. Barely. The teenager nearly collapsed from relief. As he hurried away, he whispered, Thank you. Emma gave only a slight nod. Nothing more. The leader watched the exchange carefully. This nurse had done something unusual. She had calmed his own man. Not by arguing. Not by begging. Simply by redirecting his attention. Interesting. Very interesting. Near pediatrics. A little girl began crying loudly. Her father tried to comfort her. Nothing worked. The sound echoed through the department. One gunman turned irritably toward the room. Make her stop. The father looked helpless. Emma walked over carrying the stuffed dinosaur she had bandaged earlier that night. She knelt beside the child. Remember your brave dinosaur? The girl nodded through tears. He stayed with you. Another nod. Now it's your turn to help him. The little girl hugged the toy tightly. Her crying slowly stopped. The father mouthed, Thank you. Emma stood again. The armed men said nothing. One of them quietly looked away. Even behind a mask, she noticed it. Not all of them were equally comfortable hurting innocent people. Fear existed on both sides. She filed the observation away. Minutes later, one of the attackers approached the leader. The police are requesting proof of life. The leader nodded. Later. What about our deadline? We still have time. Deadline. Another important word. This operation depended on something outside the hospital. Negotiations? Extraction? An exchange? Emma didn't know. But every conversation gave her another piece of the puzzle. She never tried to memorize everything. Only the parts that mattered. Deadlines. Numbers. Names. Patterns. The rest could wait. Dr. Harris quietly joined her again. I've been thinking. Emma continued checking a patient's blood pressure. I know. You're not frightened. I am. No. You just don't show it. Emma looked at him for the first time in several minutes. Fear keeps people careful. So why do you seem calmer now than before they arrived? She considered the question. Finally, she answered. Because now I know what we're facing. What are we facing? She looked toward the leader. A disciplined group. That's good. No. It's predictable. Dr. Harris frowned. I don't understand. You don't have to. Before he could ask another question, alarms suddenly sounded from an infusion pump near Trauma Bay 2. The sharp beeping echoed through the department. Several rifles immediately turned toward the noise. Emma walked calmly to the machine. A simple battery failure. She replaced it within seconds. The alarm stopped. Silence returned. The leader watched her once more. Nothing about this woman matched the behavior he expected from an ordinary trauma nurse. She never panicked. Never overreacted. Never wasted movement. She observed everything. And somehow, she seemed to become calmer every minute the crisis continued. He had begun the night believing the hospital staff were simply hostages. Now, for the first time, he wondered whether one of them might be quietly studying him just as carefully as he was studying them. He dismissed the thought almost immediately. She was only a nurse, wasn't she? Nearly 45 minutes had passed since the emergency department had fallen under armed control. Outside, the rain finally began to ease. Inside, the pressure only grew heavier. The air felt warmer now. Patients whispered less. Children had grown quiet from exhaustion. Even the gunmen spoke less frequently, settling into a routine that made them appear almost comfortable inside the hospital. Emma knew routines could become weaknesses, not because people became careless, because repetition created expectation, and expectation could be interrupted. She stood beside the medication cabinet, carefully preparing antibiotics for an elderly patient with pneumonia. Every vial, every syringe, every label. She worked exactly as she always had. The leader watched her from across the room. "You don't seem interested in escaping." Emma continued drawing medication into the syringe. "If I leave, my patients stay. You trust the police?" "My job isn't outside." The leader studied her for another moment before turning away. It was an honest answer that made it difficult to read. A soft groan came from Trauma Bay 3. The injured paramedic was beginning to wake fully. Emma immediately walked over. His eyes focused slowly. "Hospital?" "Yes." "How bad?" "You'll recover." He looked toward the armed men. His breathing quickened. Emma rested 2 fingers lightly against his wrist, checking his pulse while speaking quietly. "Slow your breathing." I know. They killed. They're still here." His pulse climbed rapidly. She leaned closer. "Listen to me." He met her eyes. "You cannot help anyone if you panic." He swallowed. Her voice never changed, never became louder, never sounded frightened. Within seconds, his breathing steadied again. The gunman nearest them watched the exchange. He had expected fear. Instead, the nurse seemed to lower everyone else's. Across the department, one of the cardiac monitors suddenly alarmed. A patient in his 70s clutched his chest. His heart rhythm became irregular. Dr. Harris immediately stood. "I need to treat him." "No one moves," the youngest gunman snapped. "He'll arrest." The rifle remained raised. Emma stepped forward. "He needs a defibrillator nearby." "No, he may not need it." Silence. "But if he does." She left the sentence unfinished. The leader approached. "How long?" Emma answered immediately. "Less than a minute." He considered the patient, then nodded once. "You." He pointed at Emma. "You go." She wheeled the defibrillator across the floor. Every eye followed her. She never rushed. The slower she moved, the less threatened the gunman felt. She reached the patient, checked the monitor, and administered medication instead of shocking him. Within moments, the dangerous rhythm settled. The old man's breathing eased. Dr. Harris quietly exhaled. The leader noticed. "You didn't use the machine. He didn't need it. You said he might. I prepare for what might happen." He looked at her for several seconds. "You think ahead." Emma returned the defibrillator to its place. "I work in trauma." While moving through the department, Emma noticed something else. The gunmen had established overlapping security positions. Strong ones, but not perfect. Each time one of them communicated by radio, another unconsciously glanced toward him. Tiny distraction. Less than 2 seconds. It happened every time. Not enough for violence. Enough for movement. Enough to relocate a patient. Enough to pass supplies. Enough to quietly improve someone's chances. She began using those moments. Nothing dramatic. When one radio clicked, she adjusted a child's oxygen tubing. Another transmission. She moved an elderly woman closer to emergency suction equipment. Another. She quietly placed additional trauma dressings beside Dr. Harris. No one stopped her. Every movement appeared medically necessary. Because it was. Only the timing had changed. Outside, Captain Brooks received another update. Our negotiator finally established contact. What do they want? They're refusing demands. So why are they here? No answer. Brooks stared toward the hospital. Something doesn't fit. A tactical officer joined him. We've identified at least 5 attackers. Any names? No. What about military records? Still checking. The officer hesitated. There's something else. What? Their room clearing techniques. Brooks looked up. What about them? They're too clean. You've seen training like that? The officer nodded slowly. Yes. Where? He answered quietly. Special operations. Back inside. Lisa approached Emma while carrying fresh for fluids. She spoke without moving her lips. The children are asking questions. What kind? When are we going home? Emma hung the 4-bag. What did you tell them? Morning. Emma nodded. Good. Lisa hesitated. Do you really think we'll see morning? Emma looked toward the pediatric room. They need to. Lisa understood. Hope was sometimes medicine, even when certainty wasn't possible. One of the masked men walked toward the pharmacy storage room. Emma noticed immediately. He entered alone. 30 seconds later, he came back carrying 2 large medical bags. Wrong choice. Those bags contained emergency blood products, not medication. He didn't know the difference. She quietly stored that information. The attackers understood tactics. They did not fully understand hospitals. That gap mattered. She simply didn't know when. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered. Just once. Every gunman looked upward. Only for an instant. Backup power automatically transferred before the lights stabilized again. Emma looked toward the electrical panel. Not failure. Generator testing. Scheduled. She remembered seeing the maintenance calendar earlier that evening. Every Wednesday at 5 o'clock. Exactly 30 seconds. Exactly enough time for automatic diagnostics. Interesting. Very interesting. She glanced toward the hallway leading to the utility rooms. No cameras. Limited visibility. Restricted access. She said nothing. Minutes later, the youngest gunman became increasingly restless. He walked toward a frightened resident. You. The resident froze. What? You keep looking at the window. I wasn't. You were. The rifle lifted slightly. The resident's breathing became rapid. Emma stepped between them. He needs water. The gunman frowned. What? He's dehydrated. He was looking outside. He was trying not to faint. The resident looked confused. Emma continued calmly. If he collapses, you'll have another problem. The young gunman hesitated. The leader spoke again. Let the nurse handle it. Emma guided the resident into a chair. She handed him a paper cup. His hands shook violently. Drink slowly. He obeyed. After several moments, his breathing returned to normal. Thank you, he whispered. Emma gave the smallest nod. You did well. I know. She looked briefly toward the young gunman. He's frightened too. The resident stared. What? Fear makes people unpredictable. You mean us? I mean everyone. The leader watched the nurse from across the department once again. Every conflict ended the same way. She reduced tension. She stabilized people. She solved problems before they became crises. Even his own men had begun looking toward her whenever medical questions arose. That bothered him. Authority had quietly shifted. Not openly. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But he noticed. Without raising her voice. Without challenging a single order. The trauma nurse had slowly become the calm center of a room filled with fear. He keyed his radio. Phase 2. A voice answered almost immediately. Ready. The leader looked toward the sealed ambulance entrance. Then toward the emergency department. His eyes settled briefly on Emma. For the first time since entering the hospital, he changed part of his plan. Because of her. Emma noticed the look. She did not know what had changed. Only that it had. And that meant the next hour would become far more dangerous than the last. The announcement came without warning. A portable radio on one of the gunmen's tactical vests crackled. Phase 2 is active. The leader acknowledged it with a single click of his microphone. No explanation followed. No orders were given inside the emergency department. Yet every member of the group subtly changed position. 2 moved closer to the ambulance entrance. 1 took control of the main treatment corridor. Another shifted toward pediatrics. Emma noticed every movement. Not because she searched for danger. Because patterns mattered. People revealed intentions before they revealed actions. She quietly folded a fresh blanket over an elderly patient while watching reflections in the glass medication cabinet. The attackers were preparing for something. Not leaving. Receiving. Outside the hospital, the command post had expanded into a maze of emergency vehicles, floodlights, communication trailers, and armed officers. Rainwater still dripped from the awnings as Captain Daniel Brooks leaned over a digital map of the hospital. Negotiations had stalled. The gunmen refused food, refused transportation, refused money. They repeated only one demand. Continue searching. No names. No explanation. No deadline. Just those 2 words. Brooks rubbed his eyes. This doesn't make sense. Across the table, FBI Special Agent Rachel Morgan arrived carrying a thin classified folder. You asked for federal assistance. Brooks looked up. I'm glad you're here. She placed several photographs on the table. Do these movement patterns look familiar? Brooks studied the security sketches. Military. More specific. He hesitated. Special operations? Rachel nodded. So we're not dealing with ordinary criminals. No. She turned another page. They're disciplined. They're communicating in rotating security cycles. They're limiting unnecessary violence. They entered through multiple synchronized points. Brooks looked toward the brightly lit emergency entrance. What are they after? Rachel answered honestly. We don't know. Before either could speak again, another officer hurried over carrying a tablet. We recovered 32 seconds of interior security footage before the cameras went offline. Rachel immediately took it. Show me. The recording was silent. Shaky. Low quality. Doctors crouched behind desks. Patients lying on the floor. Masked gunmen securing hallways. Then, the image paused. A woman in navy blue trauma scrubs calmly applied a pressure dressing to an injured paramedic while rifles surrounded her. Rachel leaned closer. Play it again. The officer restarted the clip. Emma crossed the emergency room with measured, economical movements. She never rushed, never looked at the rifles, never wasted a step. Rachel watched a third time, then a fourth. Finally, she asked, "Who is she?" Captain Brooks looked at the personnel list. Emma Carter. Position: trauma nurse. Rachel remained silent. Something about the footage bothered her. Not because of what Emma did, because of how she did it. She paused the recording frame by frame. Emma briefly glanced toward the polished glass of a supply cabinet. Not at the gunmen. At their reflections. Rachel looked at Brooks. She isn't watching the rifles. No. She's tracking their fields of view. Brooks frowned. You can tell that? Yes. Rachel continued watching. Emma crossed open space exactly when two attackers keyed their radios. Not before. Not after. Exactly during the moment their attention shifted. Again and again. Rachel slowly closed the tablet. Interesting. What? She's timing movement around distraction windows. You think that's intentional? I don't think. She looked directly at Brooks. I know. Silence settled across the command vehicle. One tactical officer finally spoke. Maybe she's just experienced. Rachel answered quietly. No. Experienced trauma nurses save lives. That woman is calculating security patterns. Those are different skills. Inside the emergency department, Emma finished adjusting a child's oxygen mask. The little girl looked up. Are the bad men going away? Emma tucked the blanket around her shoulders. They will. When? I don't know. The child nodded. You'll stay? Yes. I promise. Promises were dangerous. Emma rarely made them. This one mattered. The youngest gunman approached. Leader wants you. Emma stood. He escorted her toward the center of the department. The leader waited beside the nurse's station. You've been busy. I'm working. You've walked almost every hallway. My patients are everywhere. He studied her face. You don't ask questions. Would you answer them? No. Then I save my breath. For the first time, the corners of his eyes suggested the faintest smile. You've seen violence before. Emma answered after a brief pause. Yes. Hospital violence isn't like this. No. So why aren't you surprised? She met his eyes. I don't waste energy being surprised. The leader considered her answer. You think we're soldiers? I think you're organized. That's all. That's enough. He stepped closer. So what happens next? Emma looked toward the trauma base. Someone gets tired. Someone makes a mistake. People get hurt. His eyes narrowed slightly. You sound certain. I've worked enough emergencies. She left the rest unsaid. He dismissed her with a small gesture. You may continue. Emma returned to her patients. The conversation had lasted less than 2 minutes. Yet both had learned something. He realized she was unusually observant. She realized he was testing her. Outside, Rachel Morgan replayed the footage one final time. She paused on Emma's hands. Steady. No visible adrenaline tremor. She enlarged another frame. Emma's eyes briefly scanned ceiling cameras, exits, and medical carts in one continuous movement. Rachel quietly reached for her secure phone. A single number remained saved despite years without use. The call connected after 2 rings. This is Colonel James Whitaker. Rachel spoke calmly. I need you to identify someone. Send the image. She transmitted the paused frame. Less than 20 seconds passed. The colonel answered. I know her. Rachel looked at Brooks. Who is she? Silence. Then the colonel spoke carefully. If that's Emma Carter, do not interfere with anything she does inside that hospital. Brooks frowned. What does that mean? It means if she's alive, there is still a chance those hostages survive. Rachel waited. Colonel, what was she? Another long silence. Finally, he answered. That information is restricted. But I'll tell you this. I have seen experienced operators panic. I have never seen Emma Carter panic. The line disconnected. No rank. No unit. No explanation. Only confidence. Rachel slowly lowered the phone. Captain Brooks looked at her. Who is she? Rachel stared toward the glowing emergency department across the rain-soaked parking lot. I don't know. Then she corrected herself. No, I know exactly who she isn't. Brooks waited. Rachel's eyes never left the hospital. She is not just a trauma nurse. For the first time since the siege began, someone outside the hospital had recognized the quiet woman inside. No announcements were made. No helicopters landed. No dramatic introductions followed. Only a handful of experienced professionals quietly adjusted their plans. Because they now understood that one person inside the emergency department possessed a past that everyone else had completely missed. And inside the hospital, Emma Carter continued changing dressings, comforting frightened patients, and speaking in the same calm voice she had used all night, as if nothing about her had changed. Because to her, nothing had. The first hour of the siege had passed. Time no longer felt normal inside the emergency department. Minutes stretched into something heavier. The clock still moved, but no one looked at them anymore. Patients measured time by the sound of footsteps. Nurses measured it by medication schedules. The gunmen measured it by the brief radio transmissions that arrived every 15 minutes. Emma measured it by people. She checked the injured paramedic again. His blood pressure had improved. The elderly man with pneumonia was breathing more easily. The little girl in pediatrics had finally fallen asleep with the stuffed dinosaur pressed against her chest. Small victories. They mattered. The leader walked slowly through the department, studying every face once more. He stopped beside one of his men. Any movement outside? Police remain in position. Snipers? Possible. They're waiting. The leader nodded. They'll keep waiting. Emma listened without appearing to. Outside, negotiations were buying time. Inside, the attackers were doing the same. Neither side intended to move first. That balance would not last. A loud cry suddenly echoed from the pediatric observation room. Emma turned immediately. The little girl had awakened. Her breathing was fast. Her father knelt beside her, trying to calm her. One of the younger gunmen looked toward the room with obvious irritation. I told them to stay quiet. The child cried harder. The gunman started walking toward the room. His rifle remained pointed downward, but his pace was angry. Emma stepped into the hallway before he reached the door. I'll handle it. He continued walking. I said I'll handle it. The gunman stopped only a few feet away. You've handled enough. So let me finish. He stared at her. Behind him, the leader watched silently. After several tense seconds, the younger man stepped back. You have 1 minute. Emma entered the room. The father looked up desperately. I'm sorry. She's terrified. Emma knelt beside the bed. The little girl clung to the stuffed dinosaur with both hands. Emma spoke softly. Do you remember what we talked about? The girl nodded through tears. What did the dinosaur promise? To stay. And what did you promise him? To be brave. Emma smiled gently. You already are. The girl's breathing slowly settled. Emma checked her pulse while pretending to comfort her. Fast, but stable. She looked toward the father. Keep talking to her. I will. No matter what happens outside this room. He understood. He kept telling quiet stories while Emma walked back into the hallway. The youngest gunman watched her closely. How do you keep doing that? Emma looked at him. Doing what? Making people calm. They trust someone who stays calm. He looked away, almost embarrassed. I've never seen anything like this. She noticed the words immediately. Not I've never done anything like this. Not I've never been in combat. Just, I've never seen anything like this. Another piece of the puzzle. He was not as experienced as the others. Maybe trained, not seasoned. That made him dangerous, but not beyond reaching. Outside the hospital, inside the command vehicle, Captain Brooks studied updated floor plans. Rachel Morgan stood beside him. No movement from the suspects. No, they're waiting. Rachel nodded. So are we. An officer hurried inside. We've identified one of the attackers. Rachel looked up. Name. Former military. Unit. Records are incomplete. Why? Most of his file remains classified. Captain Brooks frowned. That doesn't happen by accident. No. The officer hesitated. There's something else. What? He disappeared 8 years ago. Rachel's expression hardened. So someone recruited him. Looks that way. Brooks rubbed his forehead. This keeps getting worse. Rachel quietly looked back toward the hospital. No. It keeps becoming clearer. Inside, one of the hostages gasped for air. A middle-aged woman recovering from surgery had begun bleeding through her abdominal dressing. Dr. Harris saw it immediately. Emma. She was already moving. The leader noticed. What now? Internal bleeding. Can it wait? No. How long? 5 minutes. The leader looked toward his men. No one interferes. Emma reached the patient. The woman had become pale. Her pulse raced beneath Emma's fingertips. She removed the soaked dressing. The wound had reopened. Not catastrophic. Yet, she immediately applied pressure. Dr. Harris. He joined her. We need sterile packs. Lisa brought them without being asked. Emma worked quickly. No wasted movement. No panic. The woman cried quietly. Am I dying? Emma met her eyes. No. You've lost blood. But we're stopping it. You need to stay awake. The woman nodded weakly. Emma continued applying pressure. Several painful minutes passed. Finally, the bleeding slowed. Dr. Harris quietly exhaled. I thought we'd lose her. Emma didn't answer. She was watching something else. The youngest gunman. He had looked away while she treated the patient. Twice. He couldn't watch suffering. Another detail. Another weakness. Not tactical. Human. The leader approached. You could have escaped. Emma looked up. What? When everyone was watching her. He pointed toward the injured patient. You were near the service corridor. Emma followed his gesture. I noticed. So why didn't you run? She answered without hesitation. She couldn't. Silence. The leader studied her. You stayed because of one patient. I stayed because she needed me. He looked at the woman on the stretcher, then back at Emma. Most people would have chosen freedom. Emma had chosen responsibility. He understood something in that moment. Whatever training she had, it had never replaced the nurse she had become. Near the entrance, a frightened security officer suddenly made a mistake. Believing the gunmen were distracted, he rushed toward a side exit. The movement lasted less than 3 seconds. One of the attackers immediately raised his rifle. Stop! The officer kept running. The shot echoed through the department. The round struck the wall only inches from the officer's head. He fell hard onto the floor, covering his head with both arms. Several patients screamed. Children began crying again. The youngest gunman rushed forward, furious. I warned you. His rifle pointed directly at the security officer. Emma moved before anyone else. She stepped between them. Not quickly, deliberately. The barrel now pointed at her chest. Move, the gunman shouted. No. He disobeyed. Yes. So move. Emma looked directly into his eyes. If you shoot him now, you'll lose control of everyone else in this room. The young man's finger tightened against the trigger. His breathing became rapid. Behind him, the leader remained silent. Watching. Waiting. Emma spoke again. You don't need another hostage. You need discipline. The words landed harder than she expected. The young gunman blinked. His breathing slowed. The rifle lowered. Only a few inches. But enough. The leader finally spoke. Stand down. The younger man obeyed immediately. The security officer remained alive. Emma had saved him. Not with force. With judgment. The leader looked at her for a long moment. You understand command. Emma said nothing. You knew exactly what to say. Still silence. You've done this before. Emma finally answered. I've taken care of frightened people before. He almost smiled. That isn't what I meant. She picked up a fresh trauma dressing from the cart. I know. Then she walked away, leaving the question unanswered. For the first time since entering the hospital, the leader no longer doubted his instincts. The quiet trauma nurse was hiding something. Something far larger than years of emergency experience. Outside, federal commanders had quietly begun changing their operational plans because of her. Inside, the attackers had begun changes theirs for exactly the same reason. Emma Carter had never fired a weapon, never raised her voice, never claimed authority. Yet both sides had reached the same conclusion. She was no ordinary hostage. And whatever happened next, the final outcome of the siege would almost certainly depend on the quiet woman who still insisted on introducing herself only as the trauma nurse. The emergency department had been under siege for almost 3 hours. Dawn was beginning to push through the rain clouds, casting a pale gray light across the shattered glass of the ambulance entrance. The fluorescent lights inside the department still burned brightly, but the natural light made the room feel different. Sharper, colder. Everyone was exhausted. Patients drifted between fear and fatigue. Nurses continued checking medications on schedule. Doctors quietly monitored vital signs with whatever equipment remained available. Even the gunman looked tired. Emma knew exhaustion changed people. Training could delay it. Nothing could prevent it forever. The leader checked his watch. Report. One of his men answered through his headset. The search team found nothing. What about the lower level? Clear. His jaw tightened. Again. Emma heard the exchange while replacing in 4 bag. So they were still searching. Whatever, or whoever, they had come for had not been found. That explained the delay. It also meant the operation was beginning to fail. Failing plans made disciplined people dangerous. Outside the hospital, Captain Daniel Brooks stood beside the armored rescue vehicle. Rachel Morgan approached carrying another secure phone. He called again. The colonel. She nodded. What did he say? Rachel looked toward the hospital before answering. He asked one question. What was it? Is Emma Carter still alive? Brooks frowned. And I told him yes. What did he say after that? Rachel repeated the colonel's exact words. Then wait 5 more minutes before making any decision. Brooks looked confused. That's it. That's all. You trust him? Rachel didn't answer immediately. Finally, she said, I trust the certainty in his voice. Inside, the youngest gunman was beginning to lose focus. He rubbed his eyes repeatedly. His movements had slowed. His rifle drifted lower with every passing minute. Emma watched him while pretending to review medication charts. Fatigue, mental overload, reduced awareness. She quietly looked toward Dr. Harris, then toward the pediatric hallway, finally toward the oxygen storage room. He followed her eyes. He understood nothing. She expected that. Without warning, the hospital's fire suppression system released a short warning tone. Not an alarm, only a scheduled diagnostic signal. The sound echoed through the department for 3 seconds. Every gunman instinctively looked upward, exactly as they had during the generator test. Emma had been waiting, not for the sound, for the reaction. While their attention shifted, she calmly wheeled an oxygen cylinder away from the main treatment area and into Trauma Bay 2. No one stopped her. It looked completely routine, because it was. Only the timing mattered. The leader noticed after the fact. What moved? One of his men looked around. The nurse relocated oxygen. Why? For her patient. The leader looked toward Emma. She was adjusting a ventilator. Nothing unusual. He dismissed the thought. Several minutes later, another crisis arrived on its own. The injured paramedic's blood pressure suddenly collapsed. His monitor began sounding a rapid alarm. Emma reached him instantly. Pressure's falling. Dr. Harris joined her. We're losing him. The leader stepped closer. Can you save him? Emma didn't look up. I'll try. She began giving rapid instructions. Blood. Pressure bag. Prepare another unit. Lisa moved immediately. Dr. Harris followed without hesitation. The treatment area transformed into a focused medical team once again. Even 2 of the gunmen instinctively stepped backward to create space. For a few moments, everyone watched medicine instead of weapons. The leader noticed something unexpected. No one questioned Emma. Not the doctors. Not the nurses. Not even the specialists. She never introduced herself. Never demanded authority. Yet every medical professional automatically followed her decisions. Authority earned through competence, not position. He found himself doing the same. He quietly moved 1 step aside without realizing it. Outside, Rachel Morgan watched through binoculars. Movement, not violence. Purpose. She lowered the binoculars. It's starting. Captain Brooks looked at her. What is? The shift. Inside, the paramedic's heartbeat stabilized. Emma stepped back. Her gloves were covered in blood. The young man opened his eyes. Thank you. She gently squeezed his shoulder. You did the hard part. At that exact moment, a sharp voice came through the leader's radio. Abort. The entire department froze. The leader lifted the radio. Repeat. Mission compromised. Abort immediately. Silence followed. Every member of the armed group looked toward him. Months of planning, finished with a single word. Abort. The youngest gunman whispered, What now? The leader lowered his radio slowly. He looked around the emergency department, at frightened families, at wounded patients, at the exhausted hospital staff. Finally, his eyes settled on Emma. She met his gaze without fear. He understood something he had resisted since entering the hospital. The hospital had never defeated his operation. Neither had the police. The quiet woman standing before him had quietly dismantled it from the moment they walked through the doors. Not by fighting, by refusing to let fear spread, by keeping patients alive, by preventing panic, by denying them the chaos they expected. He gave one final order. "We're leaving." The youngest gunman stared. "What? We're finished." One of the others protested. "The exits, we're finished." His voice ended the discussion. The attackers slowly placed several rifles onto the floor. Outside, snipers immediately reported movement. "They're surrendering." Captain Brooks looked toward Rachel. She was already moving. "Go." Police tactical teams advanced through the shattered ambulance entrance. Flash shields raised. Weapons ready. Within seconds, they entered the emergency department. "Police. Hands where we can see them." The remaining gunmen complied. No shots were fired. No final battle erupted. The room fell into an almost unbelievable silence. Emma remained beside the paramedic's bed. She did not step forward. She did not identify herself. She simply removed her bloodstained gloves and reached for a fresh pair. A tactical officer rushed toward her. "Ma'am, are you injured?" She shook her head. "Patient first." He looked at the unconscious paramedic. Without another word, he helped move the stretcher towards surgery. Captain Brooks entered moments later. His eyes searched the room until they found Emma. Before he could speak, Rachel Morgan quietly touched his arm. "Wait." Across the department, another group entered. They wore plain tactical clothing without visible insignia. One gray-haired colonel stepped forward. The moment he saw Emma, he stopped. For a brief second, the entire room seemed to pause. Then, without a word, the colonel stood perfectly straight. He raised his hand in a crisp military salute. No speeches, no introductions, no explanation. Emma looked at him for a long moment. Then, almost reluctantly, she returned the salute. Only once, only briefly. The colonel lowered his hand. "Good to see you again." Emma answered softly. "You too, sir." Nothing more. The doctors, nurses, police officers, and surviving hostages watched in stunned silence. No one understood. No one asked. They didn't need to. The salute had answered every question. Not with words. With respect. Emma looked around the emergency department. Patients still needed treatment. Children were still frightened. Stretchers still needed to move. She picked up another pair of gloves, turned toward her nearest patient, and quietly went back to work. The siege was over. For everyone else, the morning had become history. For Emma Carter, it was simply the end of another shift. The first rays of sunlight reached the emergency department just after 7 o'clock. For the first time in hours, the automatic doors opened without fear. Paramedics hurried inside, carrying fresh supplies instead of wounded officers. Evidence technicians photographed shattered glass and spent shell casings before carefully stepping around the treatment areas. Maintenance workers began measuring broken doors while hospital administrators spoke quietly with detectives. The siege was over. The work was not. Emma stood at a sink, washing dried blood from her hands. The water ran red for a few seconds before disappearing down the drain. She looked at her reflection in the small mirror above the sink. There were dark circles beneath her eyes. A faint bruise marked her forearm where she had struck a bed rail while treating the paramedic. Her navy blue trauma scrubs were stained beyond saving. She turned off the faucet. There was no time to think about herself. As she stepped back into the department, she saw Lisa sitting outside pediatrics, holding a paper cup with both hands. Lisa looked up. "You stayed." Emma gave a tired smile. "I said I would." Lisa laughed softly, though tears quickly followed. "I thought we were going to die." Emma sat beside her. "So did I." Lisa stared at her. "You never looked afraid." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I was." "You hit it." "No." Emma looked down at her hands. "I just couldn't let it decide for me." Lisa nodded slowly. For the first time since the shooting began, the silence between them felt peaceful instead of heavy. Down the hallway, Dr. Michael Harris finished speaking with two detectives. One of them pointed toward Emma. Dr. Harris answered a few questions before walking over. "They're asking about you." Emma looked toward the investigators. "They have enough to do. They want your statement. They'll get it." He hesitated. "And they also want to know why a colonel saluted one of my trauma nurses." Emma smiled faintly. I wondered how long that question would take. So, she looked around the busy department. "Patients first." Dr. Harris laughed quietly. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have today." He knew she wasn't being dismissive. She was simply choosing what mattered most. "I'll tell them you're finishing rounds." "Thank you." Near the operating suites, the injured paramedic was being prepared for surgery. His partner, whose shoulder had been bandaged outside the hospital after the initial attack, waited beside the stretcher. When Emma approached, the young paramedic reached for her hand. "I remember." She smiled gently. "That's a good sign. I remember you telling me to breathe. You listened. I didn't think I'd see daylight. You've got many more sunrises ahead." His eyes became wet. "I never thanked you." "You already did." "No." He shook his head carefully. "You stayed with me." Emma looked at the surgical team waiting nearby. "They're the reason you'll go home." The paramedic followed her gaze. "Maybe." He smiled weakly. "But you're the reason I lived long enough to meet them." Emma squeezed his hand once before stepping back. "Take care of yourself." "You too." As the stretcher rolled toward the operating room, he lifted one hand in a quiet wave. She returned the gesture. Then she turned away before anyone noticed. Outside the emergency entrance, television reporters had gathered behind police barriers. Camera crews adjusted microphones while helicopters circled overhead. Every network wanted the same story. The hospital siege, the mysterious nurse, the military salute. Hospital administrators politely declined interviews. Police confirmed only that the situation had ended without further bloodshed. Inside, Emma never looked toward the cameras. Captain Daniel Brooks found Rachel Morgan standing beside an ambulance. "You were right." Rachel folded her arms. "About what?" "She changed everything." Brooks looked through the emergency entrance. "We planned 3 different assault options." Rachel nodded. "We never used them." "No." "Because she prevented the situation from collapsing." Brooks sighed. "I've led tactical operations for 17 years. I've never seen anyone influence an entire hostage situation without giving a single order." Rachel smiled slightly. "She gave plenty of orders." Brooks looked confused. "When?" "To patients. To nurses. To doctors. They trusted her because she earned it." He considered that for a moment. "You knew who she was." Rachel shook her head. "I knew what she had been." "There's a difference." At the far end of the department, the gray-haired colonel waited alone. His uniform was plain. No decorations. No visible name tape. When Emma finished checking her final patient, she walked toward him. For a few moments, neither spoke. Finally, the colonel smiled. "You still choose hospitals. They need people. So do other places." Emma looked around the department. "So does this one." He nodded. "I suppose they do." He reached into his jacket and removed a small envelope. "I was asked to give you this." She accepted it, but did not open it. "What's inside?" "A letter." "From whom?" "You already know." Emma slipped the envelope into her pocket. "I'll read it later." "I expected you would." The colonel looked around at the doctors repairing equipment, nurses changing dressings, and custodians sweeping away broken glass. "You built a good life." Emma followed his gaze. "I tried." "You succeeded." He hesitated. "They'll probably ask questions." "I know. What will you tell them?" Emma smiled. "The truth." "And what's that?" She looked toward the trauma bay where another ambulance crew was arriving with a patient suffering chest pain. "I'm a trauma nurse." The colonel laughed quietly. "Only you could answer like that." The overhead intercom sounded. "Trauma team to Bay 1. Emma instinctively turned toward the voice. The colonel noticed. "Go." She nodded once. "Goodbye, sir." "Goodbye, Emma." He watched her jog toward the trauma room. Not fast. Not dramatic. Simply purposeful. Exactly as she had always moved. The emergency department slowly returned to its familiar rhythm. Fresh patients arrived without knowing what had happened only hours earlier. A little boy with a broken wrist cried as his mother carried him through the entrance. An elderly couple waited patiently for examination. A young father paced while holding his feverish daughter. Life continued. The broken glass would be replaced. The walls would be repaired. Reports would be written. Investigations would continue for months. The news would move on to another story. But the people who had lived through that long night would remember something very different. Not the rifles. Not the shouting. Not even the fear. They would remember the quiet trauma nurse who never raised her voice. The woman who walked toward danger only because someone needed help. The nurse who refused to leave a single patient behind. Weeks later, a small framed photograph appeared on a shelf inside the staff lounge. It showed the entire night shift team standing together after the department reopened. Doctors, nurses, paramedics, custodians, receptionists. Emma stood in the back row, still wearing navy blue scrubs, still smiling only slightly. There was no caption mentioning the siege, no plaque describing what she had done, Only one simple label beneath the frame, night shift. Emma preferred it that way, because long before anyone knew about her past, and long after they forgot it again, she would still report for work before sunset, check every emergency cart, straighten every blanket, comfort every frightened patient, and quietly begin another ordinary night. The end.